Hey guys, welcome back. So today I'm going to be filming my favorite books of the year video. So I went through each month and I just picked out a few of the books that I loved from each month, ones that gave 5 stars. The only ones that I'm not including in these are going to be my top 5 books of the year, including my favorite book of the year, because those I'm going to do at the end. So at the end I will have my top 5 favorite books. Some of these I have physical copies of that I will show you now. Others I'll put the cover up in the corner over here. And yeah, let's get into it. I think I have about 15 books maybe, so let's get into it. So this isn't super long, but the first book I'm going to start with are books 2 and 3, I believe, or 3 and 4. I'm not sure exactly which order, of the Lesson in Thorns series. That's Door of Bruises and Harvest of Sighs. I read both books in January. I did a reread of Lesson in Thorns, the first book in the series. I had read that one last year. And then I think in December, I read it again and carried over the new books into the new year. I really loved this whole series. I don't want to give away spoilers, but something happened in the second book that turned a lot of people away from the series, and really changed a lot of people's minds about the writer, about the books, about the series, about the characters. And a lot of people said that they actually wanted to consider the first book as a standalone because everybody really loves the first book, and just kind of ignore the subsequent books. But I didn't do that. I decided to see it through. In the first book, it kind of hints at what that big thing is that everybody had like a big problem with, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, to each their own. But it had been hinted in the first book, but it wasn't confirmed. And so I wanted to read the subsequent books to see if it really was true. And honestly, the way it was done, it didn't really bother me. I know that that's probably going to be like controversial to some people probably, but I didn't really mind it. You know, it's a book, it's not real life. We read a lot of crazy things in books. If you're a like Kindle Unlimited reader, if you read a lot of like romance or smut, we read a lot of crazy things. So honestly, the things that happened in these books, that big thing that everybody kind of had an uproar about, didn't really seem like that big a deal to me. I've definitely read worse. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed this whole series. I actually think I liked the subsequent books more than the first book. Still really like the first book, but I actually think the series actually gets better as it goes. If you don't know, this series is about a group of friends who grow up together in a English manor, out in like the moors, I think, like hill country. I think of like that big house from A Secret Garden, like the movies from the 90s, or the movie from the 90s. I think of a house like that. And there are 5 friends, I believe, who grew up running around this, does not grow up, but they spend, I don't know if it's an entire summer or several weeks over a summer in this house, running around while their parents do adult things in the house. And they end up having like a wedding in the like chapel that's built on the grounds of this house. And it's very apparent that they each have very different personalities and quirks and things that they like. And so the first book starts off when they're kids, and then it eventually shifts to when they're older. I think it's like 10 years later, 15 years later. They're all grown up, and there is Auden, whose family owns the manor. He is your typical like English rich boy who went to boarding school and has now inherited his family's wealth and their manor, their estate. There is Saint, whose family, or him and his mother, lived in the village where the manor is. They didn't have a lot of money growing up. Saint's mother passed away, which caused him to come back to Thorn Chapel, where the manor is. And then there is Poe, who is one of the girls. She is American. Her family was friends with Auden's family. I believe her mother actually grew up in Thorn Chapel. And once the summer's over, she goes back to America. She has now come back because Auden has hired her to categorize, or I don't think that's the right word, catalog the his library. They have like a massive library in the manor, so he's hired her to catalog the library. Then there's Beckett, who is a priest. He is the priest in Thornchapel at their church. Then there is Becca, who is an like landscaping person. Her and her dad own, or her dad owns, and she works at like a landscaping company, but like a fancy rich people one. Like they're building, remodeling the entire like maze they have in the backyard of the gardens of the manor. And then there is, oh, what's her name? Delphine. She's one of my favorite characters too, so I can't believe I didn't remember her name. Delphine. She is an influencer on Instagram, I think, and that is her full-time job. She makes, you know, she does a lot of things. She does modeling. She's a plus size model, which is amazing. I love all of these characters so much. I think Beckett's probably my favorite. But I love all of them so much, and like I said, the whole thing that kind of threw everybody off wasn't that big of a deal to me. So really love this whole series. So like I said, I finished those two in January. Then oh, and I don't know if I said those were written by Sierra Simone. She also wrote the American Queen. I always forget the name of the different books. American Queen, American Prince, I can't remember. Okay, so the next book was in February, and that was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I really love Kristen Hanna's writing. She wrote The Nightingale. She wrote The Great Alone. So her books are historical fiction. This one is about a family in Texas in the 1930s, and like the farmers there who grew corn, I think, or wheat, I don't remember, and like the gold rush, and when everybody was moving to like out to California, and it's talking about like the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era in Texas and like that part of the country. And her writing is just so like descriptive, but without being like overly flowery or lyrical. She just crafts like such a beautiful picture, and she really just pulls you into the story, which I love. She also wrote The Nightingale, like I said, which is about World War II. That book like broke me in the end. I love that book. And then she also wrote The Great Alone, which was also really good, which is set in Alaska. But yeah, I gave this book 5 stars. It was actually nominated for a Goodreads Choice Awards for historical fiction. I think that was last year though. So these books, I don't know that any of them are new releases. Actually, that's not true. One, I think, is a new release. 2 are a new release, I think, at least. But a lot of these are not. A lot of these are books from previous years, you know, that have been released in previous years. I'm not really taking that into consideration. But yeah, this was nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award, which I definitely think it deserves. Okay, so the next book was also in February, and it is Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. I mentioned this book in my least favorite books of the year video, because the second book in the series was actually one of my least favorite books of the year. I read this in February, and then I immediately picked up the second book. This first book I loved. I gave it 5 stars. It is fantasy, but it's also historical fiction. It's based on like Vikings and like that era and like all the mythology. It was same thing as Kristen Hanna, very like descriptive world building, and it just pulls you right into the story. It's so easy to like imagine yourself in that world and with these people, and it's a romance also, but it wasn't like overly rushed. I don't think the romance really truly came into play until maybe halfway in the book. I mean, it was kind of hinted at, but it wasn't like, you know, insta love like right away, which I really liked. I don't love huge like slow burn. I mentioned this in the other video too. I don't love huge slow burn. I don't want to have to read 600 pages before you get to the romance, but I also don't want it to be on like page 2 either, unless I go into the book knowing, like expecting that. But this definitely focused more on like the fantasy magical element, and then the romance was kind of secondhand, so I really like that. Adrienne Young also wrote the Fable, which I think I mentioned in the other video also. I really liked that series as well. I read that last year. So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars as well. Okay, so next is March, and the first book I do actually have a physical copy of. I have it right here, and that is going to be Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho. I gave this 5 stars. I really liked it. I think I actually enjoyed, no, that's not true. I liked this one probably about as much as the first one. I love the writing in this. I love the like the lore and the mythology and the culture, and the characters. I love found family, and this has a lot of that. I think maybe this book has more of the found family aspect in it than the first book did. I think the first book focused more on like the magical aspects and the like building of the story, which obviously is the first book, so it's going to. And I think this one focused more on the characters, which I really liked. So I give this 5 stars. I'm learning on and off. I'm learning Korean, and this had a lot of Korean words in it that I had not heard or that I didn't know, and so it was cool to see those and kind of learn those along the way. I really like that the author included those in there. And yeah, this was a 5-star read. Okay, so the next book in the series is The Raven Boys, and this is, I think I mentioned in the last vlog or video that my friend Ray recommended, I think it was 12 books or 8 books maybe for me to read over the course of the year. And The Raven Boys was one of them, and I'm very glad that she did. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Again, the found family aspect is kind of what made this one for me. I really liked the magical elements and like how it was set in a contemporary world. But what really did it for me was the group of friends. So this book is about a girl named Blue who lives in a house full of psychics, and she herself has like magical elements, things that she can do. I don't want to give too much away. I know probably a lot of people have probably read the series already. I know it's really popular, but she ends up kind of thrust into this group of boys who go to this like elite boarding school, and she thinks they're all like stuffy rich boys, which they are. Well, I shouldn't say that, not all of them are. Some of them are. There is Gansey, who is the ringleader, Adam, who comes from an abusive home, Ronan, who is very like violent and volatile, and then Noah, who is kind of the quiet one, the shy one, and who keeps himself a bit, but mainly because he has a little bit of a secret. So like I said, Blue kind of gets thrust into the world or into their group, and adventure ensues. So I really like this one. There's a lot of foreshadowing and metaphors, and the magic in it is really like whimsy, and the writing in this is really beautiful. It's one of those books you pick up and you can't put back down. So I really enjoyed this one. Okay, so the next book is actually the first book in a series, and I did read the subsequent books the following month. So this was in March, and then I actually read the second and third book in May. So I'm gonna kind of lump all 3 together. So this is this book is called Flock. The first book in the series is called Flock, and this is the Ravenhood series. I gave this 4 stars. I loved it. So this is kind of a like Robin Hood retelling, but it's also got like Sons of Anarchy vibes. A lot of people compare it to Credence by Penelope Douglas. I haven't read that, so I don't know if that like comparison holds up, but it's definitely got the Robin Hood vibes with these 3 men and their like gang who basically steal from the rich to give to the poor. So this is set in a small town that is run by this very rich man who owns the plant in the town, and it's where like most of the citizens of this town work. So he kind of runs the town. I don't remember if he owns the town, like most of the town, most of the business of the town or not, but I know he for sure owns the plant, which is like the thing that sustains this town. So in this book, his daughter comes to stay with him and work at the plant in order to get her inheritance, basically. So she takes a gap year from college. She comes to the town to like I said, work for the plant, and that's like the stipulation of how she will get her inheritance. So she does it. Her father is very like distant and cold. He's hardly ever around. He doesn't really talk to her or engage with her, and so she's not looking forward to coming at all. So once she is there and she's working at the plant, she ends up meeting one of the men, Sean, who works at the plant as well, and she then ends up meeting the other men in his group, gang, whatever you call it. They kind of have like, it's kind of like mobster type vibes, but like I said, they're taking, I mean, regardless, taking money is taking money, but they're taking money to give to the poor citizens of the town, and they have this whole like plan set up. So there's a whole backstory to it. There's a whole other element to it, but I don't want to give a lot away. But I loved this book. I like binged the whole book, I think, in like one day. There was all the emotions. It's smutty. It's like heartbreaking. It's sad. This book made me cry. And there's also the like poly aspect of it, and as well as like the reverse harem aspect. So I really enjoyed it. And again, you get a little bit of that found a family part of it with the group of guys. It's actually two brothers as well, so you get the like the whole sibling thing too. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. And then the second book in the series is Exodus, and then the third is The Finish Line. I loved all three of the books in this series. I definitely plan on reading them again. I have been talking to my coworkers. We've started like a little book club at work, and right now they are reading Den of Vipers, and then we're going to be reading Akatar, which they have not read yet. But I'm hoping to add this to our books maybe next year, so that I can reread it. Well, I'll reread it either way, but I think they'll love it. So yeah, I really enjoyed these. Like I said, I gave all three books 5 stars. There are times when the writing isn't like the best in the world, but the story and the plot itself are perfection. So I highly recommend these. So the next book was in April as well. This is another book where I loved the first book in the series, but then didn't love the second book in the series. So this is another one that was included in my, or the second book was included in my least favorites video, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I did like annotate this one. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but I did annotate this book. I really liked it. It had that like good mystery, like whodunit, but set like from a high school, a very intelligent high school girl's perspective. I love Ravi, the male main character in this, and I was not suspecting of the ending at all. So this is about a girl, I forget her name, Andy. I'm sorry. There's a girl named Andy Bell who was murdered in a small town, and it's her boyfriend, Sal, who was accused of having killed her. And he, I believe, was arrested and convicted. And if I remember correctly, he committed suicide in jail maybe, or he was killed, I don't remember. But he went to jail and he ended up dying. And so the main character, Pip, decides that her like senior project is going to be proving that Sal actually did not kill Andy. And so she teams up with Ravi, who is Sal's brother, younger brother, and this whole like adventure ensues to prove that it was not Sal who killed Andy and that it was someone else. So this is the first book. The next book, actually I misspoke earlier. The second book I did enjoy as well. I don't think it was as good as this one, but I did really like it. The third book is the one that I had to DNF because it was too triggering for me. But this one I really liked. There were a couple parts in here that were a little bit triggering. I don't love like bullying. That's hard for me. So there were parts of this book that I had to kind of skim through a little bit. I also don't like when it comes to like sexual abuse or harassment, when it's kind of a he said, she said thing, and when the girl like isn't believed. This has a little bit of that, and that I have a hard time with that too. So I did have to push through some aspects of this, but I did really love it still. And I did obviously finish it, and I did give it 5 stars. Okay, so the next book is Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. I love Margaret Rogerson's writing. I've read, I think, all of the books she's published. I don't know if she has a backlist or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. But she also wrote Sorcery of Thorns, which I loved, and Enchantment of Ravens, which I really liked. This is her latest book. She's working on the second, I don't know if it's technically a sequel. It might be like a novella for Sorcery of Thorns. It's supposed to come out in 2023, and I'm so excited for it. But I loved this book. It has like a religious aspect to it. It's about like these nuns who use relics to kind of use magic and control spirits, control demons. There's a lot of reference to like Catholicism and other types of religions, which I found super interesting. There are a lot of things that were very familiar to me from my days, you know, in a Catholic household when I was a kid. The main character is like a badass. She was, so this book is about possession, which typically I don't like, but the way it was done here wasn't in like a horror kind of way. It was done in more of like a magical realism kind of way. So it wasn't scary or anything. This is about, oh, what's her name? Artemisia. She is a nun, basically, who, when she was a child, was possessed by a spirit or a demon, and in order to save her family from being killed by the spirit or demon who was possessing her, she burned herself, and so her hands are burned and like disfigured. She now lives in a convent where she is training to be a Grey Sister, which is basically a nun who uses magic and uses these relics to control these spirits, and they fight off demons and other spirits. There are like bad spirits roaming this world, and they use these relics to fight them. This was super cool. Like I said, I really enjoyed the religious aspects of it. I liked there was action without being like overly gory, which I really liked. It was beautifully written. Margaret Rogerson has a knack for like building these intricate worlds and these magic systems, and all of her books are different. But you can always tell that it's her writing. She has like a distinct way of writing. So I really loved this, and like I said, I loved like the other 2 books too, but I read those in previous years. But this surprised me. It was actually really good. And this cover from ɪłsᴛᴏ, I think. I believe this is an ɪłsᴛᴏ. Yeah. This cover from ɪłsᴛᴏ is gorgeous. So yeah, this was one of my favorites this year. Okay, so the next book is She Who Became the Sun. I actually, this is by Shelley Parker Chan. I actually started this, I don't remember if it was at the beginning of the year. I don't remember when this came out, but I started it once when it first came out. And this is an ɪłsᴛᴏ edition as well, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe it's not actually. But when it first came out, I tried to read it and I actually didn't love it. I just couldn't get into it. For these type of books that are like, I mean, this isn't a huge book, but they're kind of longer and are based on like lore and history and things like that. I have to be like in the right headspace. So the first time I started it, I didn't love it. I just actually ended up stopped reading it. The second time I picked it up, I think Ray and I buddy read this together, I'm pretty sure. I was in a much better headspace. I annotated it and I loved it. So this is kind of a Mulan retelling, except this time the girl takes her brother's place. She pretends to be her brother, and she ends up a monk in a monastery, and where she stays for several years before war kind of reaches their doors. There's also a like a non-binary character in here, which I loved. This is also sapphic, which I love. It was really good. The writing was really good. It was like just this like sweeping like epic fantasy based on like Chinese lore and legend, and I really liked it. There's a second one coming out, I believe, next year maybe. And I'm really excited for it, and this cover is gorgeous as well. Okay, so the next book is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I love this book. So I listened to the audiobook of it, and this is very like, kind of like Clue, where you have to, or not you, but the characters have to follow like clues and like think their way through riddles and just like use their like critical thinking skills and their intelligence to get to the next clue and to get to the like end prize. Again, this has found family and the like sibling aspect. It's very like Knives Out kind of, where a old man dies and he, instead of leaving his millions, billions, whatever, to his family, he leaves it to an outsider girl that nobody's ever heard of. She doesn't know him. She doesn't know how he knows her. And she ends up having the one stipulation to her inheriting this money is that, or this whole like empire, is that she has to live in his house for 1 year. She cannot like leave his house. Or I think she can leave for up to a few days, but she has to live in the house, like has to be her main place of residence for a year before she can inherit everything. But the problem is that his family actually still lives in the house. So I think she has like 2 daughters, a son maybe, and then the main focus is on his 3 grandchildren. So that's where the boys come in. I love the boys in this series. The Hawthorne boys are like just everything you would want in a like group of funny, witty, southern, rich boys. So there is Jameson, there's Grayson, and then there is, so I don't remember all the boys' names, but there's actually 4 boys, and there's Jameson, Grayson, and I can't remember the other 2. But I really loved their characters. The banter between them is super funny. The house is like huge and has all these like hidden passageways and like this huge like underground tunnel system, and it sits on this huge property of land, all that stuff. And so like I said, I love the like puzzle clue part of it, but then I also love, again, it has the sibling dynamic. The main character Avery also has her older sister, who comes as well with her because she's her legal guardian. Yeah, I really love this. I'm actually in the middle of listening to the 2nd book in the series. I highly recommend the audiobook of these. The narrator is really good and does like the accents well and does each of the different brothers really distinctly. Thumbs up, I really love this one. Okay, so the next book is going to be Strange Grace. So this one was actually a reread for me. I read it for the first time last year, I think, or the year before. But I reread it with Ray this year, and it just reiterated how much I love it. You can see all the tabs I have in there. This book is spooky and creepy. It's about a small village in like right on the edge of the woods, and they offer up a sacrifice was every 7 years, I think, who will go run in the woods, and basically it's their way of sacrificing one of the boys so that they continue to prosper. And there's like no health, people die of old age. I mean, no health, there's no disease, people don't die of like old age, there's no quarrels, there's no crime. Their crops grow, babies don't die during childbirth, mothers don't die during childbirth, the whole village prospers. And the way that they do that is by sacrificing one of the boys, basically. Sometimes they do come back out, but they come back out changed and very different. I don't want to give a lot away, but I love this. It is poly. There is a kind of non-binary trans character. Again, same thing, found family aspects. This group of friends who grew up together, who love each other, and you know, love each other in every sense of the word. So I love this book. Melanie from Mailto recommended this one a couple years ago. Unfortunately, her book channel is no longer active. It might still be like, you can probably still search it, but she doesn't post on it anymore, which is really sad because she was my favorite YouTuber. But yeah, she recommended this one and I love it. This is one of my favorite books. I think this was my favorite book of last year or the year before, so I highly recommend it. Okay, so the next book in July was called The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. He is now the re-established CEO of the Walt Disney Company, which I am very happy about. I read his autobiography in, when did I say? July. Highly recommend it. Even if you aren't a Disney fan, he is a very smart and savvy businessman. He was an executive at ABC for like 15 years or something before coming to Disney. He was then the CEO of Disney for like 12 years, I think, or something. Retired for a year and everything went to hell, and now he's back, thank God. So his autobiography was super interesting. It's actually narrated by him, which I love. It was also some sad parts. He actually talked about the shooting that happened here in Vegas on October 1st, 5 years ago, I think. So it was interesting to hear about something that happened here where I live from somebody else's perspective who lived outside, or doesn't live here but was also out of the country when it happened. So if you're like someone who likes business, someone who reads like memoirs, interested in like that kind of world, or as a Disney fan, I highly recommend this one. The next book is going to be Howl's Moving Castle. I have a whole reading vlog dedicated to this one, so I'm not going to go super in depth. Loved it. I know so many people read this book. I haven't seen the anime yet. I need to. Like I said, I did a whole reading vlog for it. Loved it. I loved how whimsical it was. I loved the banter. The idea of a door that opens up to different places, different dimensions is like such a good idea. I think somebody needs to write another book with that kind of aspect to it. Made me laugh. I really loved it. The next book is going to be A Curse in Ash, written by Julie. She has a very long Greek last name, starts with a Z, and I don't want to butcher it. She is on Instagram. She was on YouTube as Pages and Pens, but she recently changed her channel name to like Julie ZEE author. I've been following her on YouTube for a few years now, and her first book just came out last year, I think, which is A Curse in Ash. I finally was able to pick it up before the second book came out. The second book just came out, and she is currently, I think, just finished edits on the third book. I knew that I was going to love this. Didn't disappoint. Probably one of my favorite books of the year, just shy of making top 5 books of the year. It is Polly. It's got Faye. It is the magic system's really cool. The main character's a badass. So well written. I love like the world building and the like all the cast of characters. Really good. I loved it. I really enjoyed this one. Okay, so now we are coming to my top 5 favorite books of the year. Okay, so the first book on this list is going to be This Is How You Lose the Time War. If this was a different year, this could have been my favorite book of the year. I went into it with very little expectations. I was basically just doing it to kind of be part of the hype. The FOMO was real because everybody raves about this book. But in reality, I should have hated this book. I don't like flowery writing, like lyrical writing, like poetic type writing. And this book is all of those things. It's hard to explain. It's one of those books where you don't really know what happened exactly. So there are these two, like, I don't know if they're humans. I think they're like AI beings who are in the middle of a war. The book kind of illustrates time as like a strand, and they are moving up and down the strands of time, going into different timelines and eras. And one being is fighting on the one side of the war, and the other is fighting on the other side of the war, and they are basically leaving each other love notes through the strands of time for the other to find. And this was so beautifully written. I actually listened to an audiobook. Books like this, I know that if I'm going to get through it, it's going to be through audiobook. And I'm so glad that I did, because it just reads almost like a song, and like poetry, and it was so much easier for me to like understand and process, and it was just beautiful. Like I said, it could have very easily been my favorite book of the year. Then the next book is going to be Forging Silver into Stars. This is within the same world as the A Curse So Dark and Lonely books. I don't think it's technically like part of the same series. I think it's like addition to the series, like it's adjacent to that world. A lot of the same characters are in it. I actually loved ᴛᴏᴏᴅᴜ more than the original series. I loved getting to see Jax and things from his perspective. Again, it's queer. It was like I felt like the whole range of emotions reading this book. It made me angry, it made me laugh, it made me cry. The author talks about consent like perfectly. Again, it has found family, and I actually liked the characters from the first book more in this book than I did in, I mean, not the first book, but in the other series, more in this one than I did the previous series. I love getting to see like them from Jax's point of view. So I highly recommend reading this. It helps read the first series first, just so you're kind of familiar with the characters and kind of some of what they're talking about, but you don't technically have to. I think it could be a standalone. I believe that I'm pretty sure that it's going to continue into a series, which I really hope so, because I really enjoyed it. Then the next book is a big one, Court of Silver Flames. I read this not in one sitting, but like I binged it. From the beginning, when reading ACOTAR, I loved Nesta and Cassian so much, and so I was really excited to get a book from their perspectives. I really liked the way this looked at like trauma and PTSD and grief, and like depression and mental health. I love Cassian. I love his like how much of a smartass he is. I love how Nesta doesn't like take his shit and pushes right back. Like I said, I am reading or going to be reading the ACOTAR series again with my coworkers, and I'm so excited to get to read this again. Okay, and now finally for my favorite book of the year. If you've been around my Instagram, if you've seen other videos, you might already know what it is. But it is Dark Rise by C.S. Picot. First of all, that cover is gorgeous. C.S. Picot was actually, she wrote The Captive Prince, which is actually my favorite book and my favorite series of last year that I read, and she is going 2 for 2. This has such a cool magic system, and it's also queer, and it's kind of like, it's like knights kind of, but they do magic. And again, with the like found family, people kind of thrust together and having to work together, but becoming friends. The villain in this, the bad guy in this, is one that you like love to hate. And I'm so excited to see where the rest of the series goes. This is, I think it's considered YA, if I'm not mistaken, maybe. I think it is. But it is a perfection. I cannot wait to read it again, and I'm so excited to get to the next book in the series. So there you have it, guys. Those are my favorite books of the year, my top 5 favorite books. I don't know how long this is going to be, so I don't want to go like super in depth. But I will link all of the books down below. You can also look at my Goodreads, which is always linked down below, to see my reviews on all of these books. And I will see you guys in the next one.